going? You just coming back from Vegas, out there partying?
Oh my God, Vegas. It's whole other realm, I'm telling you. So good. It was good. I was there at a conference, and really it's just great to be among a bunch of really cool people doing really good things. And I would say to anyone out there, if you want to change things up, move your geography. And that goes obviously as a metaphor, like change your tribe, but definitely it's a big step is to go and travel and be with other people doing cool things.
Hey, so Kate, what were you? Hey, so let me ask you a question. What were you doing at the conference?
I was actually speaking about confidence, and I was networking with a bunch of people. And I think that that's the number one thing is I know I was going to present to bring my A game and to be able to add influence and impact. But really I go because I want to find other people that are doing cool things. And Vince, this is why I want to hang with you. I want to be part of what you're doing because we can be amazing in our own little lane, but we cannot have that big of an impact if it's just us. We've got to do it together. We've got to create, in military terms, a grand strategy. And that's really my goal right now, right? Is to create a grand strategy or to write a playbook, a new playbook that involves more players and more people having some fun, for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, so overall, what was the context of the conference? Like you went there, were you getting information or were you kind of like giving information out?
Well, I think that because I've had so much experience and that people knew who I was, and that's the strange thing about being around the block for a little bit, is that people know who you are. And that's something I definitely want to hit on a little bit is the power of influence, Vince. And that really is understanding. And we've touched on this in shows before, but what does it mean to have influence and impact? And really, there are three different ways that we can have influence. And one of them is we teach, like you with coaching. You're teaching people how to be better players, which is metaphoric for so many things. We also role model, right? We role model the way. We show people the way of other ways that they can do things. And last is we challenge people. All these things are ways that we can have a greater impact. And I think in general, people maybe one more than the other. And they're like, whoa, I never thought about challenging people. Or, whoa, I never thought that now that I'm role modeling. But I think that I'm in a place right now where I can really role model the way and have a greater influence. And that takes a big step. That for me has been a big, being a woman and also being like from a big family and going, oh, geez, people look up to me. It's like, oh, and it comes with a responsibility. And I feel deeply honored to be in that position.
Yeah. So, you're talking about ways of talking to people and we keep going back and forth over these different concepts of talking about inner warrior in men and how they, take criticism. Yeah. Today, I was scrolling through TikTok and scrolling a little bit, but it's really bad through Instagram. And it's disheartening, the amount of posts of men talking about, conversations about how people need to communicate with them or how they need to communicate with other people. So it's like all over social media. So I don't understand what is driving this force of, this lack of communication between the genders or whatever.
Well, that's such a good point. And I think that I would love to touch base on that too. But I think that it's also just coming down to the bottom line is this. We're arguing about things, but we're all coming from the same place. What do we want to be heard? We want to be validated. We want to be acknowledged. We want to be loved. And I always say that if I say something and someone goes, oh yeah, you're right. I legit, Vince, am uncomfortable when someone says I'm right.
Why?
Because I don't want to be right. I want to be heard. And people are always like, whoa, you don't want to be right? I'm like, oh, hell no. Because it's just more important for me. And I don't know if it's because I was brought up Catholic or something, but it's like, I don't need to prove a point. I just want to be able to someone to say, wow, I heard your point of view, because that to me is the higher value. And I don't know if you agree with me or not. What's that?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
No. Okay. All right. Because I have this saying, which is funny that you brought that up. And this saying I say is, I always tell my kids this: if I'm right, we have a problem. And my daughters used to go, what do you mean? Even when I was in the military, in the Army, I used to tell my troops all the time, if they'd ask me a question or a situation and I'd lay it out, I said, okay, if you go this route, this is going to be the result. If you go this route, this is going to be the result. But either way, if I'm right, we got a problem. And the guys, one day one of them came back after a mission. He goes, sir, you were right. And I was like, man, we got a massive problem, don't we? He goes, yeah, we have a big problem. Because you think about it, after you do some deliberate thinking on something, or you put it all together, and then you present it, then you start seeing the strategic implications of what happens if you make bad tactical or bad operational decisions. Like
100%.
finances.
Right. This is awesome. I love it that you have this different perspective, because I've been reading the book, The 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene, and I am obsessed. People are like, what are you reading? And I'm like, I am obsessed by it. And that's why I brought up this whole concept of grand strategy. I'm like, oh, I get to talk to Vince. But it's really like, if we're, for men and women in particular, we're going back to the communication issue, is I think that most women generally communicate through relational, like how relationally we relate relationally. Where men, it's more about ideas. So
Right.
there are two different ways that we communicate: men ideas, women relational. It's legit. So, but we're also often talking about the same thing. And I love this strategy about, for men in particular, and women who are listening, take notes of this one, is that if you're going to tell a guy a story and you want to tell him something, give him permission to just listen, because a man listening is looking to solve something. By nature, men solve. That's their job. So all you just have to say, hey, listen, baby, can you just listen? All you got to do is listen. The guy's like, woo, I just got to listen. Then you're going on and on. He's like, this is so boring, but she just wants me to listen. I don't have to solve anything, right? So this is an important aspect of, be clear on the upfront what you want. And I think that will clear up a lot of miscommunication.
Oh, absolutely. But, from a generational standpoint, and we were talking about this just before we came on, I think the generation behind us lacks that continuity of, when you say process information and then look at a solution of a situation. What I find now, more so when I talk to the younger players on my team, or the younger men when I'm speaking in groups, is what I'm finding out is they lack some context of understanding situational awareness, and then some simple processes to come up with a solution. They literally see a problem and they'll either walk past it, ignore it, or pull the phone out and videotape it.
Right. I know, right? So tell me this, though. This is so keyly important. Situational awareness is obviously it's a tactical concept. It's a concept of military concept. But how would you teach that to people as a general way of increasing your communication? Because this is key. I'm going to write an article on it now, and you and I are going to co-author it. And I'm going to post it, because you just dropped on something huge. And I would love if you would, dig into that and explain what that means to be situationally aware.
Well, I always use this analogy when I talk to groups. Anytime I go talk to any group, be it in a college level, military, I said, when you walk into the airport, once you get your ticket and you get to where you're standing, I need you to stand still, look up, see what everyone's doing, pay attention to what everyone's doing. Everybody's got their head in their phone. Okay, so at this point, you have come to understand that everybody around you is oblivious to anything that's happening. So at that point, you flip that. Then you look at where the exits are. You look at where the people at the ticket counter are. You start looking at mannerisms. It becomes people watching, right? Mm-hmm. So when you start people watching, you start looking at seeing tendencies and things that are happening around you. At this point, you don't realize it, but you're processing situational awareness, because you're listening to what's happening around you. You're visualizing what's happening around you. And then you start problem solving in your mind events that could possibly happen or not happen, because you've paid attention to what's going on. Wow. Nowadays, a lot of men have lost that trait. And I'd say, and no knock, they can get mad at me and what, but I would say, it's a taught thing from your dad. Mm-hmm. So I would say from 15 to 20, my grandfather, my dad, my uncles, you need to be situationally aware of your surroundings. You need to always be looking up. You always need to. And it was drilled into us, because they were all military guys, but it was drilled into us. What's weird is that now I see in society, when I go out, even if I'm walking down the street in St. Pete, walking down the street in Tampa, the amount of people that have no idea what's happening around them.
Right. But let me bring this down to a granular level. So if mm-hmm. you're in you're coming in, let's say we're talking about communication and men and women communicating. How do we apply this same incredible awareness into a conversation where there's a conflict, right? That like, what are you actually arguing or discussing? So how do we, and I think this is what the article is going to be about, because you just gave me everything, is that how do we, I thank you so much. I'll totally give you credit, Vince. But like, how do we come into a relationship conflict to get our needs met? Because I do want to drill into that subject a little bit, to be situationally aware in communication, because I know we can look at it strategically,
right,
tactically, and operationally. I know these are like military terms, but I love it.
right.
There are ways that we can look at as a conflict. Are we just going to focus on where the problem is, or can we pull back and say, well, this person's upset, I wonder why they're upset, and actually be able to look situationally at what the other person's issue is? Do you think that there's a way that we can apply that?
I mean, it's like in any conversation I have with anyone, I need to know the backstory to where they got to the point of the conversation. So it doesn't matter what we're arguing about. If the point is, I'm constantly in that conversation, I have to stop that conversation and go, okay, how did you get to where you're at with the emotion and the vibrance of your argument? How did we get to this point from a simple discussion? And then you start getting the backstory. Well, this is what, so then think trigger words, something that, they have a flashback. It's just those things. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that when they get aggressive about something in the conversation, or they become impassioned by something, there's something else behind it triggering it.
So good. Oh, Vince, I love this. So situational awareness is also just being aware of, like, I'm going to use the vibe. Like, what's going on? So if you're keyed in and you come into a situation and you see someone fired up, do you want to step into that fire, or do you want to just observe it a little bit and figure it out? And I think that that's an important aspect of handling any kind of conflict resolution. One of the funny things I'd love to talk about and just bring up real quick is the story about when men come home from something, or they're coming into a situation, and they've been out in the world, right? Like, just say they're out, slaying dragons, right? And when they come home, their home is like a safe space. In old times, it used to be the woman used to bring them slippers and the newspaper, right? And then maybe they have their man cave or whatever. But legit, for women, you need to understand, when a man comes to a place where he feels safe, he needs decompression time. And if, I'm speaking that for any situation, any man, any woman situation, boyfriend, girlfriend, when my sons came home, I always knew I needed to give them chill time to process what happened in the outside world. Because once they come into their safe haven, it's like, whoa, okay. It's really, really very, very important. And I think that this is a wonderful conversation to have respect for where people are. Men and women are different. As soon as a woman will come through the door, she'll start talking, and this happened. The guy's like, whoa, right? So we communicate differently. Is it wrong? No. Is it something to be aware of? Yes. Is it something to honor? Yes. And this is why I know you and I are so committed to having honest communication, just like this, to be able to help and bring value to people. And you know what? We have to always infuse things with humor. I think, Vince, that's something that you and I share, because you and I are talking about like some heavy stuff, and like we laugh too, because we understand the importance of humor. It's so key to life.
Oh yeah, and I think some people always take me wrong, because I'll smile in the worst of situations, and they'll be like, "How can you be smiling right now?" And I'm like, it's just my nature is that it's a bad things that are going on, but you know what? We'll figure it out. And it's just the way I see it. And as you're talking about the communication piece and people coming home, honestly, I stepped back and thought about this. You said it now, but I've been thinking about this. I'm looking at men on the West Coast, East Coast, who are staying home with the kids, and the wives are working, because you have a more liberal society that's pushed towards putting women more in key positions than men. Then I look at the South and the Midwest, where you're still in that traditional male husband role, where the guys go to work and the wife stays home with the kids. And so it's funny as how we have this divergent of society coming in on the internet, because the social media allows it, but coming together now, and you're having all this conflict of men of saying, you know what, I need to be more vocal home. I need to be, assertive. And the thing is, I see a lot of men today, they have decided to back away instead of having those tough conversations, regardless of where they're at. They just cower back on the conversations, because of just the societal pressure of putting them being overly masculine. Maybe that's it.
Right. And we talk a little bit about this in Claim Your Inner Warrior for sure, about men, women, and intimacy. And particularly I came at this through grief, right? As you know,
Right.
This was my window in. And why I approached it from that way is obviously the loss of will. But I decided when I was writing that article about how men express grief and loss, that I noticed that men were very different when I talked about Will. And I even remember this, and I'm going to be honest with you, during Will's service, all the young men that came through the line, they were like shell-shocked, like they just came home from war, right? They were a mess, but they were shut down, Vince. And so every single boy that came to the line, I put my hand on their heart, and I was like, listen, Will made a choice. It's okay. You're not going to make that same choice. Anytime you want to come and talk to me, I'll make you cookies and you come over because it's okay. But every single boy, I put my hand on their heart. Boy after boy after boy. The women, I'm like, hug. But every single man, young man that came through that door, I would say that to him because I saw the face and it made me so sad. And I think that that's now, even to this day, Vince, I have cookie dough in my freezer because I'm always making cookies for people. And because I'm giving what Will loved. Will loved my cookies. Right. So the cookies are symbolic of my bridge to express love. And I just wanted to bring that up for you. But what are the ways that we can express connection? And for me as a mom that just lost a child, that's what I did. And I felt like that was the biggest thing that I could do, was to tell each young man. And I literally put my hand on their heart, me like this big and they're like this, but they were still just young men that were frightened. And how are we holding men in that space, but honoring them, Vince? Not expecting them to communicate like women and to fall apart, not expecting them to be able to say, I'm really hurt. That's not the way men express themselves. Number one, it's not the way our society conditions. And number two, it makes them uncomfortable. And it's okay that they are given space to communicate safely. We don't provide that in our society, Vince. We just don't.
I mean, sadly to say, the golfer this past weekend, 30-year-old golfer, the volleyball player from Stanford 2 years ago. I mean, she had, everything in front of her, and you ask yourself, and when you think about the golfer, your first thing you think is he's got money, he's 58th in the world,
gorgeous.
What's going on? And I think it is just the overall pressure of society, but some of it's all self-induced. Because one is, as I tell anybody, you can't fix your problem with a bottle or a bag of weed. You are gonna have to put that stuff down if you're struggling with life, and then find another outlet to get there. And maybe you don't want to go to church, got it. And I tell people that's fine. But the thing is, somebody said this, and it may have been you, but you got to have faith in something. And I'm not saying you got to have faith in the Lord, but you got to have faith in something. And what I find is that people that make very short-term, long-term decisions on a short-term issue, they don't have a faith in something is missing, and something they don't believe in, or it's something. And we all got to have purpose, man, when you get up. And when we're talking relationships or communication, I try to do better now and communicate with purpose.
I love that. Beautiful. Right. And it's setting the intention. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about men. I wrote an article for Entrepreneur Magazine about creating a strategic plan that's a win-win. Right. But it's for entrepreneurs and business, but it's the same thing. And I think that in a society, we're looking at things from like this side or this side. Well, really, we're both looking in the same way. And to be able to say when you're in a conflict, remember, like, as particularly men and women, a relational situation, we're on the same side looking this way to grow an amazing relationship. We're not in here. We're not boxers, right? And I think the most symbolic way that I was totally touched by how men are is like the MMA fighters. And I'm bringing this up because I'm like watching it. I'm like, oh my God, it's so violent. Oh my God. And it seems like so much hatred, right? And there's so much anger. And then at the end, they're like hanging on each other and crying. And they're like thanking God. And they're like, I love you. And I'm like, to a woman, that's unheard of. But to me, I watched it. I was like, that is poetic. That is the beauty of the man. And can you talk on that? Because I'm so fascinated by this topic.
Well, I think it probably goes way back to cavemen where men bond. And what I found out is people that do martial arts or grappling like we do, it's like something inside you that's, and I'm not gonna, it's just like animalistic, or it's a part of you of Darwin, of survival, that you get into it. And then when you got two people that are in the same boxing, be it wrestling or any physical activity where you are actually having to use hand-to-hand combat, it's a different switching within your mind. And what we're finding out is a lot of people are upset. So a short history lesson is the YMCA was built back in the early 30s after the roaring 20s because they felt men were too feminine during the 20s. And so after the 20s was over, they decided to put football, boxing, all these physical sports into play in the United States. They made physical fitness part of the curriculum in the high schools to get the men to become more masculine. And then what happened was we've kind of taken that out of the school system now. So you don't have a lot of guys playing boxing, because when I grew up, you had to box, you had to do martial arts, you know. You had the Westerns, Papa, you know, John Wayne, you know, everything was aggressively taught, you know. And you were talking about Patton last time we talked, and it was that Patton-esque vibe that men are supposed to have that help us communicate with other men. Because somebody said this, and this is a true statement, and I never thought about this till he brought it up, and he said, when men walk into a room, when there's a room full of men, humanly, alpha males asserts who the alpha in the room is.
They do.
They look at and see where the pecking order is in the room, or where within, and men put themselves in an internal hierarchy without vocalizing it.
Right.
And I watch it.
Does it tend to be pretty accurate, Vince?
Say again?
Does it tend to be pretty accurate? Like,
oh,
absolutely. I think that it tends to be, right? With men, they understand, like, that dude's got more. I'm right about in here. But doesn't that come with a level of respect?
Oh, it does.
Isn't that beautiful?
Oh yeah. When you walk in there, it is an assessment of who the wolf is in the room, the lone wolf. Right. And then at that point, the rest of the pack just falls in around that. Now are there times where we may have two lone wolves in the room and they have but then it's weird and this is a weird dynamic for men, is men will separate themselves and pick the pack that they're going to run with. Wow. Without ever really having a massive conversation. It's just that they literally will separate and say, be on this side or that side of the team. And I've watched it. I mean, this is not in the military. I mean, I watched it with sports. Right. I watched it on a regular basis. And I think just women operate differently in those environments.
Because I can't, as an alpha woman, I can't come into a room, even though, because women will just, it's not the same, right? Because women are weird, you know. It's like I used to say that, like, when I used to work on all men's gym, it was chill because it was clear. Because like you said, there was the hierarchy of the men. I knew that I fit in as a woman. I was like clipped into place, but I knew that they never bothered me. I had my headset on. I called them Guido protectors, but I knew if anyone ever came in and threatened me, that person would be dead.
Right. They beat them up, man.
Right. They were watching everything in peripheral. Speaking of situational awareness, I have acute situational awareness because I was always in the war room of a gym with all men. Right. But I would go into a gym full with women and it was confusing. I'm like, why? They're comparing. Her butt's bigger or smaller. She's prettier, older. I'm like, just stop them. I can't even concentrate. You guys are driving me crazy. Right. So, and I'm a very, very much a woman. But I felt that same thing where it's like, I just want to do my thing, right? And I think that's such a beautiful, and it's an innate thing. And I think that's the most important thing that people listening need to hear, is that it's okay that it's an innate thing, that there is a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of needs, and I wanted to talk about that at some point, but we have a hierarchy of needs, and then we also have a hierarchy where we fit in. And it fits like a puzzle. It's organic. And it's beautiful, and it needs to be honored. And men are modeling that. And I say bravo to the men modeling that.
So there's a bunch of people on social media right now. I'm kind of laughing about this. Kate, it's like we're going backwards. So a lot of people on social media are now writing that maybe we need to go back to having men-only gyms and women-only gyms. And I started laughing about it. I said, okay. I'm gonna take it now. Take it out of context. I said, "Well, who screwed this up? We fought. We had men's gym. We had men's clubs. We had women's clubs. Everybody was happy. Okay, so then we get into the late 70s, early 80s. Everybody goes, let's go co-ed. Okay,
Yeah. Everything
so
co-ed.
we go co-ed. Work for 20, 70, 80s. It worked for 20, 30 years here. And now all of a sudden we're at this point of, because of social media, we're at this point now of saying, look, man, I ain't got time to be in the gym with somebody with a camera and a tripod saying I'm being creepy. I don't have time. So now there's talk about guys starting their own gyms. And then someone goes, well, you're going to get pushback by having men only gyms. And I'm thinking to myself, well, they have women only Pilates classes.
I know, but it's the bizarrest thing. And, I would have to say on the argument for different sex schools, I was shipped off to an all girls private performing arts high school. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Number one, I got really great leads in plays because I had a low voice. Even though I'm tiny, I was like, I get to play Nathan Detroit and Guys and Dolls, But what was so good about it for a woman's perspective is that it teaches women leadership, because what happens at age 12 and 13, women start dropping in math and science because they're all of a sudden, they're the only one with all the boys doing math and science. Right. And so there is literally that, and women will acquiesce to men in a room, and it's hard to develop leadership. I was part of the leadership committee, and it was the same sex experience was very, very good for me personally, because I had already seen the world before I went there. I wasn't like, we were all dressed in white, but I was like, that wasn't my existence before I went there, before I got shipped off. But same thing for a male experience, right? Like that's so important. And I know that like my dad, his why experience with being with men is so important. And I was always so grateful that men let me in an all men's gym, because I knew I was going to follow into the protocol the way that place was run. And I always did it respectively, always respectfully. And I was always deeply honored to be in that space. Very few women, Vince, are comfortable in that. And I think that's why I love coaching men, because I think very few women will meet men in that energy, but still be in their feminine energy. And that's why I think people are so freaked out when they're like, most women will say, I'm a woman and I coach women. I'm like, I'm a woman and I mostly coach men. People are like, what? Why is that so weird, Vince?
It's not, because I have nothing but respect for you, Gail Casper, Dr. Lori Shimmick, because you guys have no problem going into men's spaces to work with men. I think the issue we run into these days is that, I always see everybody on the internet trying to get women to join their groups, and then they have men asking them questions, and they're like, I don't know, I don't want to work with men. I'm like, well, sometimes you got to realize all men aren't trying to hit on you. They're actually trying to get information. There's a majority of people out there. Yeah, there are creepy ones, don't get me wrong. But there's a majority of people out there that are searching for information and data to deal with whatever their situation. Ooh. Just like the guy that was on Twitter that hit me up when he was thinking about suicide.
Wow.
There's so much of that where we have to step back, and I think we've kind of bastardized our own society. And so when you talk about will, and it's like I tell everybody, you just don't know what anybody's thinking or what they're going to do. They could be perfect, just like the golfer was actually playing in a tournament, left the tournament, and so you got to step back. Sometimes you just got to step back and look at the world. But you're absolutely right. When it comes down to spaces, man, and I can't hit on this enough, we have kind of diluted the spaces for men.
Totally diluted. What do you mean, kind of? And even in the home, we've diluted that, because men come into the home and they're emasculated by the way the communication. And I'm a complete feminist, strong feminine woman, raised boys, work with men, very comfortable in my feminine energy, but I also see what happens. And one thing that's so crucial, Vince, and I'm going to hit this one, and please, people, take this up, is that when a man talks and you ask him a question and a woman is there, do not answer for the man. Do not answer for him. Give him space to answer the question. I hear so many wives, I'll ask a question of their husband, and the women will interject and do this and answer for him when he's just trying to formulate the words.
He's processing it.
Give the man time to process his answer. Breathe. Count to 10. He is coming up with the language, and it's not because he's slow, Vince. It's not.
No.
There's no problem with him. There is no problem. Give grace where grace is due. Allow space and idea and thoughts and feelings to come through the man. Give him space. I can't stress this enough. It drives me bananas.
Right.
Definitely not.
And well, Kate, it's always been a pleasure getting on with you and shooting it out for an hour here, guys. This is The Corner. Kate's in hers and I'm in mine. And what we do is we bring it together to make the road meet at the path of life.
Yes, right, exactly. And join us and keep carving that canoe. You're almost ready to push it in, and we're here to give you that little extra little oomph. We'll kick it or whatever we'll do, and just start paddling, have some fun, and go after it. Go after it. You have greatness within you, and I look forward to hearing your stories as you journey forward.
That's right. Always post comments down and let us know what you think, and give us information and tune in. And we're always on YouTube, and we're always on Facebook.
Right on. And I always am making cookies. So if you ever need cookies and need a pep talk, Mama Kate is here.
That's right. Well, oatmeal raisin. All right. It's great talking to everyone.
Thank you.